My conscience hath 1,000 several tongues, and every tongue brings in a several tale, and every tale condemns me for a villain. It is that thing we do not talk about, that in the deepest corner and the recesses of our mind and our soul and our being comes forth within our own passion to tell story. For there is no good without evil. It's the darkness that is the most fascinating aspect of what we do. It has the most depth. It has the most reach. It incorporates the most forethought. So here, this season on 21 Grams, we examine the part of the soul that we often try to bury or not talk about. They say that 21 grams is the weight of the soul. But what is the weight of sitting in darkness? This is what we aim to discover this season. Welcome to 21 Grams with your host, Joe Compton. Hello, everybody, and yes, welcome to 21 Grams. I am your host, Joe Compton. It's nice to see you all. Nice to have you here, and we've got an awesome guest. Probably the most unique guest that we could have on this subject matter, and that's Mr. Jotham Austin II, Joe for his friends and his enemies, I would imagine.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, small correctioning is start. I never like to correct the host right up, but that's Dr. Austin. So I do have my PhD.
I apologize. Yeah. I apologize. No, I totally apologize.
Yeah, a lot of work.
Absolutely, 100%. You need that acknowledgement. It's like a Academy Award winner. You have to acknowledge it. Right?
That's right. You got to say it, right? You got to have it there. And you feel I'm like, oh, do I say anything? But yeah, no, just want to,
Yeah, no problem. It's fine. And correct me all you want. I mean, it's totally fine. But tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Joe, so everybody gets a sense of who you are.
Yeah, so my day job, I am a research associate professor at the University of Chicago. There I study and work with electron microscopy. That's a technique where we can look inside of cells, how cells go together, protein structure. That's pretty much what I do during my day job. On the other side, my creative side, I'm an author. So I have a debut of my novel, Will You Still Love Me If I Become Someone Else? It's a psychological sci-fi thriller. I have a short story and anthologies, other kind of shorts. And then the other thing that takes up a lot of time is my podcast. So me and my co-hosts, Nick and Georgia, The Rabbit Hole of Research. In that podcast, we explore science and try to have fun with science through the lens of sci-fi, fantasy, pop culture, horror, and kind of separate the hand-wavium from the actual factual. So, yeah, that's a little summary. There's probably other stuff, but no, we'll stop there.
A little teaser. A certain somebody next to you is going to be on the podcast soon.
That's right. Yes. Yep. Just in a couple of days, you'll be on there.
Yeah, I have
talking about the exact opposite of this, love. So.
Yeah, totally. Interesting juxtaposition that we're putting ourselves in today.
Yep.
The reason that I obviously, I want to have you on because I just want to have you on. You're amazing to talk to. We've had so many awesome conversations over the years, and we got to hang out a lot at Dragon Con, which was really amazing and a lot of fun. But I'm curious how you look at, because of who you are and what you do, are you looking at writing something a little bit differently than maybe the average person would look at writing something? Do you find? Yeah,
I think that when it gets down to it, you have to tell a good story, and you have to know story theory. You have to know the components of a story. You have to put those ingredients in. So I think from that approach, I probably am like any other storyteller, thinking about the construction of the story, especially after the first drafts. As you get into, put the first draft down, then as you go through your revisions, you are thinking about the, kind of the components that you need to tell a compelling and good story. And so I think that part's the same. Maybe a little different than average is when we get into maybe some science, or we start thinking about kind of speculative stuff, kind of approaching that maybe a little bit differently, where I am thinking I was on a panel recently where I was talking about this, and one of the things I said is I try to do no harm. And so when I write speculative fiction, I try not to go off into hand wavium too much, and really try to stick to, if there are facts known, I try to use those facts and that knowledge base, and then expand from there, maybe into the creativity and kind of the near future or even far future science. But that's something I take that seriously, and I go into these projects with that in mind. So as I'm going through my edits and things like that, I try to stay true to the science facts that we know currently and have in hand. So
That's have you explored the idea of why we write in darkness? Why we kind of go deeper into that? Is there a chemical something that we can talk about in terms of that?
I mean, I'm not a neurologist, so I'm gonna lay that out there. So I don't want my neurology friends coming after me. But yeah, there are known, kind of, our lizard brain, fight and flight. We have this kind of response to fear. I think the thing, and it was interesting, I just read this in the book Sapien, and one of the ideas there is about storytelling and how that was the big jump. Like, there's a number of them, but that was one that allowed us to become who we are in that evolutionary kind of step, is the ability to tell story and have stories be told. And the one interesting thing when you think about story, in particular horror and villains, is that it is a opportunity to kind of explore these emotions in a safe space. So you can actually have this kind of discussion and talk about it, and then have the ability to comprehend this story and go, aha, put yourself into that position, empathize with the character and go, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that thing that this character did, and then move forward. And so I think we are still tethered with this kind of ancient machinery, and we can tap into that in our story and kind of go from there and kind of get that excitement, that fight, flight, what do they say? A fear and without control is a phobia, and a fear with control is an entertainment, right? So you can kind of think of it that way, and we kind of toy with that in our own minds and our own kind of stories.
I think the fascinating thing you said there too. I mean, you said a lot of fascinating things, but the thing you said that is interesting to me is that there is a separation that we can, storytelling can be something that we explore, but can we compartmentalize between darkness and light in terms of storytelling? Do you feel like that's a biological thing or a psychological thing, or do you feel like that is just where we're at? We go with emotional aspects of it.
I think it might be a human thing, right? So I think you might be cutting there. That once again, this ability, to interact as a social animal. We are very social. And so when you interact that way, you do have this kind of ability then to actually parse between, and you start setting up the codes of, togetherness. Like there are certain things. So if you go, these are the tenets that make us all good people. This is in our community, in our society. These are things we do. People who break that or go around that or subvert that, then you go, those are bad. And I think then we can start to parse through that as humans, as social creatures, and go, okay, these people are, and start to really play that game and begin to kind of make judgments about people. And
do you have to have a moral inset to kind of be able to do that, though? Do you feel like you have to have a basis of morality to be able to convey that properly in storytelling?
And I mean, as a storyteller or a reality
well, either one. Yeah. I think they do. I do think they mix. Is right.
Yeah. So I think, but also that is the constructs of society, right? So and culturally, so what one culture may find immoral, another culture might not, right? And so we run into that all the time, and kind of with our feelings and judgment, stereotypes, they all kind of boil into that, because this is the way I was raised. This is the community I came from. You go to a new community and it could be something very harmless. And then that thing is like, well, this person's immoral. This person's a bad person. Really, they're not. You get to know them. You're like, oh, this is actually one of the, coolest, friendliest, helpful person, but they do this thing that I always thought was this path to immorality. And I think that's, that is very cultural, and that is kind of a setup there of humans and kind of our own. I don't know if it's innate.
Mhm.
I could be wrong. Someone could correct me on that. That's okay. But yeah, it's I think it's a learned. We learn those behaviors. We learn that those constructs of our society, our culture.
That's yeah. I think you're right on with that. I think that because also too, I don't know. If a lot of people want to reflect, where they came from, their background within that construct too. So I think a lot of that too plays into not just your morality, but where you go dark wise, right? I mean,
Right.
where you live in the streets of Chicago is a lot different from where
Yeah.
I live in darkness, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. No. I think. I mean, that's once again from story pulling on your cultural kind of spotlighting that and using that. I mean, I think that's just people write what you know. It's not just like what you know, like I know about, making a podcast or whatever.
right,
Oh,
right,
that's great. But I think it's also your cultural basis. You can give, I mean, people have this, they always say this, and it's true. If you give everyone in the room the same story, idea, and prompt, and they write that story, they will all be different because we all come at it with a different perspective and a different viewpoint. And so when you start writing your antagonist, i.e., the villain, and you start crafting that character, the same ideas that you apply to the protagonist, they have a want, they have needs, there's something in the way, they have a thought process of why they're right and why they should have what they want. All that has to be fleshed out, and that all comes from you. You can pull from your own cultural kind of experience because we've all had people, persons, society, culture kind of in our way of achieving our goals. And you can kind of use that and kind of flesh that out. And once again, therapy, a safe space to kind of explore these ideas. And that's kind of the fun part of writing, I think, and constructing the villain or the villain in your story. And that could be a person, that could be society. I mean, and it could be environment. There's a number of ways you can do it. And I think that's the fun part of it, when you get down to it.
just to make everybody aware, above me you'll see QR codes pop up on the screen when we talk about a certain subject. That QR code will lead you to that aspect. I have the two books that Joe has out, and also his podcast going through here, so everybody can go check those things out and click on them. They'll be out throughout the broadcast. But I'm curious, and right now I have the Red Line Horror Story up here. And I'm curious, tackling locally something that you're aware of. You're like you just said. Writing from what you know in your environment. Was that the challenge for you? Was it something different that you wanted to take on with being a part of this horror anthology?
Yeah, no, when I wrote that story, it was, I kind of had it had the supernatural elements. I don't want to give it away. It was a fun story, and it does involve birds, and I have a slight phobia of birds, and we can touch on that. But so yeah, write what you know. But yeah, it was about this young man in high school and trying to navigate, trying to grow up. He's a young black man, living with his grandmother, his big mom, and trying to navigate that space and trying to fit in to a community that he's not quite a part of, because he was, kind of adopted by his grandma. His parents passed away. And so he's kind of now put into the situation and, just being a kid. And then you also have kind of the society kind of pressures on that, and his kind of interplay of all that and the horror of it builds up to it. And then the supernatural element of it. And, it was just a generational kind of advice and things like that. And some of that was my own, like kind of just, this was me going back many years. So it was fun to write and putting my mind a teenager, but also I have, my two boys. I mean, one's 21 and one's 15. So kind of just going through that and, kind of, reliving that through them. They never think that we were kids and know what that was about. But, you know, kind of now having that. So you're right. And it was. And then putting this horror spin on it. And it was, you know, kind of horrific at times, like going through it. And still, you know, kind of people are going through it. And out in the streets is not safe for people of color sometimes. So that was something that I kind of wrote into the story and wanted that to come through, but then also use horror as that backdrop and have people then enjoy it. Once again, an enjoyable story. And you get this other bit as you dig into it, maybe a reread, and you go, oh, that's what he's talking about, or that's what he's thinking about. And that's kind of the cool thing about story.
Is coming from a POC perspective an important element for you, or is it just depending on the story?
I think every story I write is from a POC point of view. I don't know if I could write necessarily. I probably could. I mean, let me say I can, and I have other characters of other nationalities and things like that. But
Right.
you know, I'm always filtering that through my own lens and how they. Once you know, that's started this all off. It filters through my lens, my mind, and I really don't try then to bend that to fit some other narrative. You know, I kind of write, this is it. It goes on a page. I don't necessarily, I don't know, maybe I do. At this point, you know, I want to go, I don't necessarily think about it, but as I write, these themes come out, themes of identity, themes of who we are, what our place in the world, what we want to fight for. So stories I'm writing now, you know, kind of that's what they touch on. And that's, you know, I can't, I guess I can't help it. Right. That is what it is. But yeah.
What I'm curious, you know, I've asked this of other POC writers on the show this year, even. Are you, because of the societal way that we, you know, have viewed POCs in the media and the mediums that we're all working within, you know, and it's not always, well, most of the time it's not very good light, you know, uh, are you concerned about going darker because that might taint the POC perspective a little bit, or placate, you know, societal norms?
Yeah, you know, once again, I said about science, but I do no harm also. So the thing is to have well fleshed out characters and not rely on stereotype. And so I think that's something that, you know, I am mindful of, like, you know, because we all can slip into stereotype. It's kind of,
Right.
you know, it's society. We joke around and we have that. So really, when you write, you do want to not do that. And so there are bad people of every, you know, corner of the world, you know, in flavor. So that part there, that is what it is. So really don't try to buy into the stereotype. Write the character, write the situational, write the good story, and even counter that with their protagonists, right? So have, you know, kind of write the story where all, you know, the good guys are all white men, and then the villains are all black, you know, kind of people of color, you know, that then you're getting into that line, that stereotypic kind of thing. Can that
You're
happen?
pretty much crossing over that line at that point.
I mean, can that happen? Can you have a story like that? Yes.
Yeah.
But don't rely on stereotype. I mean, write the story the way it is. I mean, does that situation happen in real life? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So I'm not telling people they can't write that or they shouldn't write it. It's just if you're going to do it, then go at it with the, you know, kind of with everything and full intent to flesh it out and have a story, and not just kind of have the stereotypic thing and oh yeah, you know, don't get lazy, because then it's like that's the stereotype. Oh, it's a tall black man. Yes, he is violent. Oh, I see it. I do. And then you don't have to write that character, their story, their wants, their desires, why they actually are the person they are. I think that's the part there. When you do that, if you write it, then you can have your characters be whoever. And then if you give them that agency in your story, I think people then can go with it, and they can then separate, okay, yeah, this is a fictional guy who's a total, you know, not a good person, versus, you know, the people that they see out in the real world. And I think that's what you have to do. when you write story, in my mind, for a good story.
When you described your red line story, and then we get into your novel, Will You Still Love Me? I get a sense that psychology is a very important aspect for you in writing. Do you feel that's a fair statement?
Yeah, I once again, identity. I think I love playing with the idea of identity, who we
Uh-huh.
are, pushing that identity to its breaking point, and then re-knitting the pieces back together after you're broken after you've done bad things to all your characters, putting them all back together, and what that ramification is. So I do like playing with that, and I do like that tension that's built there. So
You're kind of
yeah,
stretching that definition for Will You Still Love Me, though. I mean, the character goes through some enormous torturing,
yeah,
because
and
he's tortured to begin with, right? So,
yes,
and trying to navigate how to deal with that is basically the entire story in terms of, any kind of meets a person that kind of can help him, guide him a little bit, right? And that's kind of
right,
how it goes. Uh,
yeah.
but but what becomes real and what isn't is the theme of
Becomes
that
that's right, yeah,
story.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's for folks who are in Will You Ever Become Someone Else. It's about a guy, Brian. He gets the memories of 110 people by accident. He has to kind of figure out who he is, and his fiance has to figure out if she can love who he becomes. And so the crux of the story was about relationships, and kind of the idea is that anytime you're in a relationship with anyone, a friend, a brother, a family member, whoever, your partner, over time you both change. And then can you love who you become in that change, and can you stay together? And so to write the story, it was like, what can I do to really amp it up? And it said, well, if I give this person 110 memories, and it really tests his fiance's ability to know who the real Brian was versus these other people in his head.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, and then as Joe alluded to, there was our villain, Marcy. She was there to help guide, and we learn there's a few twists, and I don't really want to,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know if
yeah,
I
yeah.
could spoil that too much, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
but yes, yeah. And Marcy was, it's funny because someone reviews and people, she's one of the most polarizing characters I think I've
yeah.
ever written, and I've had people like come and just tell me how much they hate this fictional character. And have other people like, are you going to write more stories about her? Like, we can't get
Right.
enough. Like, and that goes to that point you made earlier about, kind of seeing a villain, and a part of us, we like
Yeah.
kind of seeing that, but then we also know to back off. Like, oh, I shouldn't like that, but I really do. Like, and I think that was a surprise for me. I didn't really expect that reaction from people about that character in particular, but yeah.
I had the same aspect, but I actually, when I wrote my first novel, I aimed for that. I aimed to kind of challenge you to tell me the villain's not a better person than
Mm,
the
hmm.
protagonist, right? And that was kind of my whole goal with this, telling a dual perspective novel like that. But yeah, I totally see that. And but that also, for me, I think, in doing this show now, I've done 12 episodes, and I've got 9 more to do. But for me, I feel like that's the sign of you're doing something right, when the villain is the more talked about character,
Yeah, yeah,
because it seems like
yeah.
you're adding more depth to that character that people gravitate towards, and then kind of challenge themselves within themselves, going, "Am I think Marcy's right. Am I a bad person because I think Marcy's right?" You know?
Right. That's right. And to go to your point, I mean, that's in popular culture,
Yeah,
in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think if you look at the movies that are really solid, like, that was a
yeah,
great movie, the villain is usually, if not maybe a little more fleshed out than the superhero that the movie's about. And I always go to the Black Panther. I think that was, Killmonger. I don't know. I was like, I think he's right. Like, I don't,
yeah.
I don't know, when you watch it, you go, I think this guy was absolutely right. And,
I, I had I had the same thought about Thanos.
you know,
I had the same thought about Thanos. I thought Thanos
that's
had
right.
some
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
points.
He did. Yeah. A little but once again, that's that thing we talked earlier about, what is that motivation? Why does this character think that they're right? And then like you said, that challenges you, the viewer or the reader, to go, are they right? did they, is this actually a good thing to try? Like, and with Thanos, it's really wrong. The science
Yeah,
doesn't work. It's really bad.
yeah,
It wasn't the right way to go about it, but it was like
yeah.
you
There's
take
ignorance is
pause.
bliss, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You take pause and go, well, man, hold on. What if you do get rid of 50%? That's like a whole bunch of more resource. It's like kind of that thought experiment. And then he was super passionate. He really believed in that, and nothing was going to stop him. But yeah, no, I think if you go through the MCU and you go, this movie is good, this one, it's, you don't look at the villain. Almost
Yeah,
any movie or story, look at the villain. Like if you really felt it, that's, you go, man, that was a great story. And then people ask you why, you go, you usually won't, you'll secretly tell your best buddies over some beers, like, oh, it was really the villain. But really, you'll go, oh yeah, it was a great story, the protagonist, and da da da. But when you chop down to it, usually it's the villain is super solid, and you really, it really held their own in the story, and you gave the words the time, the screen time to develop that character and make them really believable and fleshed out. So
I have a theory about something, but I'll put a pin in that for now because you said something, you triggered something for me in talking about Killmonger, and you had mentioned something earlier about how psychologically for you, deeping into the delves of this darkness affects you as a person when you're writing this. And I just read an article about Michael B. Jordan's experience with dealing with Killmonger, where he
mhm,
had a hard time removing himself from that character or
yeah,
that character's soul from him. And he had to do some really deep soul searching and exercising. And I related another story about Jim Carrey, who had a similar experience when he played Andy Kaufman. He just
Kaufman,
so
yep,
embodied
hmm,
that character, he could not get out of it, right?
yep.
And so I'm curious from your perspective, writing a story about a guy who has 110 memories and dealing with all 110 of those. What does that do for you psychologically? How did you feel all of that? Was that something you had to navigate through? Did you carefully try and just maneuver through one memory, and kind of, or did you compartmentalize that way, or did you kind of feel all of it all at once, and kind of how did you get through all that?
Yeah, I moved through the story. So I mean, it was a little behind the scenes. So when I first started writing this, I thought it was going to be like an episodic, kind of web story.
Okay.
And I was going to do, and this was before kind of that was a real thing. I mean, people were kind of doing it, but I was like, oh, this is
Yeah.
a great idea. And I think there was a site called Chanillo or something like that. Like, I think it's still around. They were doing a serialized story. And I was like, oh, here's this thing. I got 110 people. What if he just lived through each memory? So this compartmentalization, as you're talking. What if he went through a baby or a teenager or an old woman or an old man? Like, just kind of this whole thing. And that would be his experience. Like, and then on the background, the big question is, how does he get fixed? And you'd have the whole other story. And I got about 4 chapters or 5 chapters in, and I got this email randomly, and this person was like, "I need the rest of the story," and it was like this weird feeling. I no one's really reached out, and they were like, "This is a whale of a story. Can I get the rest of it?" Or you just, I'm like, I'm actually writing it every month when I release. I have to write that chapter, and so I said, well, maybe I'll stop, and I kind of pulled it all back, and then yeah, I went and I said, let me write the story and let me figure out what's going on. Let me actually put a story together. And it couldn't be 110. So people, just so they know, when you read it, you don't go through 110 people. And there's a little twist in there that I don't want to spoil. So,
Yeah.
but personally writing it, I did go through those characters and I had to think about those memories and I had to think about the situation that he was in because he treated people that he loved really poorly. And it was an editor, kind of, you go out and you do this, and this before I got picked up by Red Askew for publishing, and it was kind of like that. I had to balance his behavior and other characters' behavior. Like he
Mhm.
couldn't get a moral pass, and they didn't because I was writing. I don't think I really wanted to go into it because I wanted to have the story. I wanted to have my
Mhm.
cake and eat it too. So I wanted to keep my hands clean and
Right.
move in and out. But really, it was like, no, you have to balance that. You have to actually have him come face to face with these moral choices he made because he did some really vile stuff to people that really cared about him, and he was out of control. He really wasn't in his own self. But is that a free pass to do whatever? And that was the thing that I had to wrestle with and kind of really craft around and think about in that character and really have them, because they were the protagonist, but then also internally they were their own villain a little bit. Their own, there was an actual, villain, Marcy, but in their own character, they were kind of, you at points of that story, you're rooting against the guy. You're like, you know what? I really don't care about this. He wasn't a likable protagonist.
Yeah.
Unreliable, not likable. And that was kind of then had to write. And it was interesting. The second half of the book, I actually didn't have any POV from him, point of view from him. It was only Marcy and his fiance. And when when it went through edits to get published with Red Askew, Jen Salsi, it was kind of, then it was like, we really should have his point of view in here. And this for people, that the structure is that event happens and then we go a few hundred days. It's just a crazy ride. And then part 2 happens and it starts back at the day of the event, and really from the viewpoint of the 2 women in his life, of his fiance Brenda and Marcy.
Yeah. And
then it was like, you need to add his point of view back in, because we've built this we might hate the guy, but we do want to find out what happens and hear from him. So I had to go back in and write additional scenes from his point of view in this kind of part, and really kind of temper that and really to see a different. I was like, well, I'm not just going to write what I wrote earlier, but really give this other side where he is this kind of sweetheart. He is this really kind of kind, but you can see who he was before. And then you see him kind of switch and kind of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of thing. And that was kind of fun. And I think that filled it out. That was kind of a missing piece. And so when we did that was nice. Listen to your editors. I mean, they kind of, when I say editors are the eyes and a writer's blind spot. So
there you go.
But yeah, they're not
That's
villains.
awesome. I love that deconstruction. I imagine certain aspects of it were a little bit more personal than other aspects of it for you. You like you said, you put a little bit of you in everything you do, or what you know into what you do. Do you feel like when you get a little bit more personal and you're in a darker space, that stays with you a little bit longer for you?
I don't know. When I write story, I get in and out. I usually have a few stories going at once. So I'm emotionally invested.
Mm-hmm.
I'm relieved when I'm done, but I don't know if that's just relief because I've got 80,000 words now. It's like, but yeah, I'm not. I mean, I have other writer friends who talk about this, and they stay with the character, and it's there, and they know their favorite coffees, and they have this whole religion around them. And I just don't. Like, usually I go when the story's done, it's wrapped, then those characters just, they go back to their world off camera, and I don't really revisit them unless I'm writing like something, a follow-up or something different. Usually I move on, and maybe that's because I just have other stuff really lined up that I have to put my head into these new characters kind of experiences and then move forward. But when I'm writing, sometimes you do get in that scene and you're like, oh, this is heavy. Some of it is how will readers react to it, especially scenes like Lisa Love Me. There's scenes where there is kind of this racial tension because he has the memories of this woman who was during civil rights movement, and it was this bathroom scene, and he kind of goes through that and this rage he has and this anger. So you write this out. Once again, do no harm, do research, talk to people, think about it, kind of go through and write this scene and kind of write out that tension and that horror, that kind of, once again, this kind of really, this kind of pull. So when you get done that scene, it's like you've cleansed yourself, you feel back centered, like you can breathe. Okay, I've moved past it. My characters moved past it, and let's now keep going. And so, yeah, but that's something that when I do write scenes like that, I do think about, and I do want to make sure that the reader understands why that scene is there. It's not just there to rub anybody's nose in it, but really to build the character, build the scene, move the story, and it comes back later. Give it, you want to, you hopefully build enough trust when you do that, that the reader goes, okay, I'm gonna see where this guy goes with this, and hopefully it pays out and I'll get it. So
Okay, so you're someone who typically utilizes the left side of their brain more often than the right in your day to day work in your life. Do you find you have to does writing fiction activate the other side of your brain a little bit better for you, or do you find the one side that you're always in most of the time is trying to creep in and say something about what you're doing creatively?
yeah, and I will say that I think there's a lot of reading more recent research that the brain is not as compartmentalized as that. It's just a convenient
Yeah,
a story for us to go
it's a
through.
way
But
to
yeah,
it's a way to separate,
that's
right?
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
but I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I think being a scientist, you are creative, you are thinking
sure.
creatively, you are analyzing usually a bunch of abstract data that really doesn't, hasn't, the pieces haven't been put together yet. So you are telling a story. And I think when I use that to my advantage, like I think telling narrative story is an advantage in anything you do. If you can have a story, and even when I'm giving a talk about my work, I sometimes think about it like, what's the this is the protagonist. This is the thing I need people to know and remember. This is the thing that got in my way. So I'm gonna build them up and have these conflicting. So you put this story together,
Mhm.
and when people you get to the end, they really, oh, that was, I really got, like, they felt something. It was conceptual and it was there. And so I think that plays into everything, and developing that as a skill was important, and it was something I wanted to do. But I think other people, they should, go learn how stories constructed, learn how you give a speech, do stand up. There's a lot of storytelling there, and there's fun ways to kind of get at that, and then bring that to your work. Any work you do, there's probably story involved and creativity, and we just don't think about it because we're taught not to think about it. We're taught to think left and right brain,
Yeah,
instead of this crossover that happens all the time. But I will say too, um, I had to learn to write both ways.
yeah,
Like when you actually write academic papers, you're not constructing them like a story. So you
right,
have to you have to think like that. And I think one um, a boss I had in my postdoc, Andrew Stalin, I think I wrote this proposal, and it was like the first kind of proposal I wrote. And he read it and he said, "Oh, this is like it. It reads like the way you talk." And we got, and usually like in a story, that's what you want. You want to have your voice in there. You want to get your
right.
voice. So it was like, no, you got to get your voice out of there. You're writing like a creative piece here, a fiction piece, and that was some training there. And then opposite,
Yeah,
up to when I started writing, it was really poetry and short fiction. So kind of writing poetry and writing even, villains. And I mean, you got to have it. You build that into your poems. So long format poems and performance. I would go out and perform, and so that was kind of my writing outlet. And it wasn't until 15, 16 years ago I wrote my first novel, or tried to write something that I call a novel. And it was I gave it to a friend to read, and they read very little. Gave it back. Said, "This is the worst thing I've ever read." Like, this. They're like, "Joe, you tell such great stories. What this thing is not good." And that's that. You got to learn how to write a story.
yeah,
But it was kind of, but it was very academic. Like I had an outline, and chapter one, act one, two, three, and it was like this. So I wrote to the outline instead of writing a story. So really you had to go, and you have to find your own techniques and everything. But that was kind of that push pull between those two kind of worlds. They had to find their place, and so that's
It's
but
funny
yeah.
because I was thinking of a quote from Chuck Palahniuk who said he talked about they asked him how he builds his surprise, his twist, right? And he goes, I think of it this way. I think of my story being IKEA instructions of an IKEA dresser, and my twist is the frustration I feel after I've read the instructions to the IKEA dresser, right? mean,
Yes.
that's a vast difference of what you're talking about, but it is.
Yeah, yeah,
But people
yeah.
can relate to that compartmentalizing, right?
Right.
That's
No. Yep. Yep.
you
Yeah.
think
No.
you're
You
left,
just got
you're right.
you got instructions, and then do you follow them? Can you follow them? Should you follow them? All those questions get asked, and you put down on paper. But yeah. So
And then the way you react is, typically, the anger you feel after putting an IKEA dresser together. You have 40 more screws, and you're going, why do I have 40
yeah.
IKEA screws?
Right. There's got to be a mistake. I missed something. Yeah. No. That's Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the worst is when you get halfway in. I mean, that's the plot hole. You
Yeah.
get halfway in and you realize that you're supposed to, you mirror image the whole thing. And so you got to unscrew now a dozen screws with the little, Allen key. I don't know if you ever put IKEA furniture together. Yeah, you get the little Allen key. And
I
yes.
think anybody can relate if they put anything together, right? Yeah.
But that's the plot hole. That's it right there. It's like, oh man. And then you try to take as little apart as possible to fix the problem. I mean, if we're going to run this IKEA, right? That's right. Right. You just got to usually take it apart. You just go, oh, well, I just got to go scrap this whole thing. But yes.
I'm also curious about fundamentally the way you approach research for a novel versus your day-to-day job. Your podcast is rabbit hole research in it, and the way that I experienced it was you came at it with a lot of technical and clinical evaluations of what we were talking about and biological. You did a lot of research to talk to me and the group about what we were talking about. I don't want to give too much away because but it's about love, where and
Yep.
the idea of love. But I'm curious, do you approach that differently than you would putting research together for a novel of 110 memories?
No, I mean the same. I have the story idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a story idea. I want to do something, and then I kind of start writing things. So I just start writing the story. But I'm also doing research into some of the science, the near science, where are we at in the field? How far can we push it? What can we do with memory movement? How much storage does the brain actually have? Can it store 110 other people's memory? It's all this kind of stuff that we really don't have answers to. There's good guesses. There's research going into it, but you start compiling all that and trying to build a story. Where are memories stored? Why are they stored there? Which ones did you forget? Not forget, episodic, amnesia versus, so you have all this kind of, stuff that you got to have for the story. But as you're telling the story, you're just kind of working your way through it. And I kind of, when I get to a point, sometimes I will add marks to myself to go back, check the research, check the science. This is what I think. And we do that on the podcast. Like we have the full episode and we just talk, we have in our conversation. But then we have a mini episode the next week where we revisit things that maybe was like, well, let's put that in the show notes, or I'm unsure, or I think that's the way it works. And we can have time, or I can have time, me and the co-host, we can have time to go back and think about those things. And that's the same thing when I write. I try to get the first draft down. I have a start point. I always have an end point, and then I'm going to make it there between it. So that's my roadmap. And as I go through, that's something. I'll start doing research there. Not to get bogged down, but it is just, let me fix this. Let me correct it. Let me keep moving forward. And in edits, I go through, and as I read something, is that right? Did I get that right? Is that the way it works? Usually they aren't plot damaging things, but they are just enough that, it's nice to get it right, or as close to right. 10 years from now might be wrong. It might, that's okay. So
I'm curious what was the most fascinating thing you learned about the human brain in dealing with 110 memories?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it was the amnesia kind of responses and kind of the difference, because I was worried as I started going, you have this memory loss, because all the other 110 people don't have their memories now. They all lose their memories. And I had a character, Granny, who Brian becomes really close to. And I was like, but how does she... The question I had after I wrote it, and I read the first draft, I was like, well, how does she know how to put makeup on? And so then I had to do research into that. And it is fascinating. Like there's episodic memory. So people with amnesia, they lose this episodic kind of the highlights of your life are gone. but then you can remember still kind of these basic, how to tie your shoes, how to put on makeup, these very repetitive tasks that you learned. And that was, I didn't know, I mean, I didn't realize that was something that happened. I mean, I saw Memento, and so, but that was the time, that was short-term memory. So there's always kind of memory deficiencies that you can have. So kind of going through it and then putting those pieces together in the story of how characters would function outside of that, that was something that I did a little digging, probably a little more researching than I probably should have or needed to, but and probably isn't in the story, except a brief mention. I think the characters themselves asked that, like, how's that work? And then someone gives some explanation, like really briefly, like in passing, because it was kind of fun things. I think as a reader, you go, how did they know they lost all their memories? How can they put makeup on? Like, it's kind of, that was so
you're trying to poke holes in it, is what you're trying.
That's right. Yeah. Right. I mean, I get curious about the things I write. I'm writing it because I'm curious about it. Yeah. And I want to push it. And so that curiosity, and that's the research part. Then I'll go and just research, or I have a friend that does that. I'll be like, hey, can I buy you a beer and talk to you about this crazy thing? And I do that. And I say, and it's not just with hard science stuff, but it could be anything, police procedurals. And, I'll call a friend up. Hey, we haven't hung out in a while. And then, let's have a beer. Hey, what about if you're arresting somebody? Will this happen? Or how does this work? Kind of. And it's, and I always learn really cool things I didn't really know about. And I think that's part of that research kind of, and tell everyone writing is go reach out to people and learn these kind of different aspects. But
did you ever touch upon in your research, did you ever touch upon like folks who who've come out of comas or have had major strokes that come out and then they speak a different language or they have a different accent or a different memory? Did you touch upon that in your research?
So I didn't actually in this story. No, I mean, I know of that, and it is fascinating. Kind of, I just read Dan Brown's newest novel, Secret of Secrets, and that plays a big part in it. This kind of non-local consciousness, and kind of there's a information cloud that we pull from. Really fascinating. I actually started looking up that, so I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. No, so that didn't come into that privy, but because the way I handle in the story, if you essentially was a download kind of thing. Yeah. So all these memories, but I didn't go into how he stored all the memories. Yeah. And so I probably could, but once again, I was pushing 100,000 words. And for people that don't write, that's a really long novel. So I really don't think I could have snuck in more research, but yeah. I took it as base that he stored it locally, but now hearing about non-local storage, I am kind of much more curious about that. So.
Yeah, as you said, getting done is important.
Yes, yes.
When you're at 100,000, you're really at that point where you want to get done.
And I love the editing process. I know that's a different, people, writers will go on either side. That's like the pantsing and plotting. It's not binary, but I do like the editing process. And so I remember with We Used to Love Me, when it was coming down, the final edits, it was like, read it. If you see something, change it, but don't. And I remember I got an email and text messages like, do not add any more words. Do not. Because every time I would get a copy back, I'd be like, oh, I learned this new thing. Like this new research paper came out. I'm going to add this in. And it was like, and I was like, okay, well, that's really cool. And I would highlight it like, oh, I found out this cool thing. It really adds to the science. I didn't change anything else. The scene's the same, except look what I added. This is so cool. And it was like, do not add anything. Like this is going to the press. Like this is the last stop. And so, yeah, it was funny. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't even read it. I was like, I'm just going to, yes, it looks great. I've read it now 50 times. So, but yeah, that was something. That's just me. So I enjoy that process and going through it.
Does your the way you write change? Because now you have this horror story, you have this metaphysical story. Does the genre matter for you in the way you write in darkness?
No, I guess it does a little bit. Like, as I did write a rom-com, like it was a limited, I need to get that back out there. And I enjoy rom-coms. And when you said that, I was like, yeah, some stories, they're much easier to play into the villain and the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, you think the rom-com, it had that element in there. You know, you have this kind of element of, you know, someone, you know, they're the villain of this story. Usually it's one of the lover, like, you know, depending on the story and the construct, but it has to be in there.
Yeah.
And you just have to work it in and think about it. So yeah, the process is somewhat the same. You still want to have characters. What do they want? You know, in that case, they're both probably, they want the same thing, and there's just what's in the way of them getting that. Then now the environment becomes in their own kind of they become their own villain and their own kind of antagonist to the story. But you know, I think that's where you go. So genre probably helps. Like if you're writing a dark character, a thriller just leans right into that. Like kind of a police procedural leads right into, you know. So you're going to have this, you know, psychological, you know, that leans into this kind of story. You're writing, you know, like I said, a rom-com. I mean, you need it, but yeah, it can't be, you know. I guess it depends what kind of rom-com you're writing, like, you know, a horror rom-com. But yeah, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, no, I think you get story that it makes it easier, you know, writing a slasher and you know, having a dark villain is you need that's a prerequisite of the story. So yeah, so I think you're
there's
right.
rules of order,
yeah.
right? There's rules of order.
Right.
Yeah. I also think though, I think like with a thriller and in that aspect, in that genre, the role of grayness probably plays a lot better, you know, be more morally gray than you know, black or white. You know, whereas a rom com, the villain is black or white, right? You know,
That's right.
In terms of where they stand. And then you know, and then I think of like cozy mysteries too. You have a villain, you have a protagonist is this way. The rules of order dictate that, right? But do you you know, with like I mean, Will You Still Love Me is a perfect example of shades of gray. There is tons of shades of gray, and that playing in that sandbox, I think, would allow you to expand a little bit more with the darkness.
Right. No, I you're absolutely right. I think because now you have, you know, your protagonist gets pulled into this grayness, right? Because you're right. I think you have stories where it is that black and white. You do have just this kind of very, you know, it's expected.
And
this is what we have, and it makes a good story. Right? Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. You don't have to. You know, they're well written, easy. And I think when people say easy read, there's easy to digest. You just go, you watch it. You know, you've seen this story a million times. You don't have to think about it. You can almost autopilot it. And if it's done well and constructed well, you need a villain. I was thinking of You've Got Mail, right? They built the villain character in there, and it's a great rom com, and that's why the villain, that the darkness of it is built in there, and you just don't realize it. So I think you do have it in stories, especially really good stories of any genre. But when you play around with morally gray kind of characters, it is fun. I mean, and you also don't want to get cartoonish with it though, right? So you got to be careful that you don't go too far, that you actually stop yourself. You limit yourself, and you put on a break and you go, you know what? Oh, this is enough probably. Let me ease up. Let me switch gears. Let's try to now tell a story, right? Because you can get sucked into that, and then your protagonist can then fall down that rabbit hole and then become their own villain, and then the story then can drift off on you. So you do have to be careful. So you're right. Writing a thriller, that's usually the nice twist, because you have a character. Most of the characters could be the killer, you know, and so you're reading it and you're trying to figure out who's doing what and why they do it. And your protagonist is maybe, why were they at the party, you know, that night in the shadows and in the, you know, so you start really, that's part of the genre too, is playing with that moral grayness to bait people, give the kind of red herring and drag them kind of, you know, look at this hand and the magic's happening with this hand. So you do see that, and that's the fun part of it. So writing the story, Will You Still Love Me, I Become Someone Else, that was fun, of kind of dragging people through Brian experiencing all of this, doing these things that, you know, he's kind of experiencing. And you as the reader are going, wow, that's, I don't know about that. This guy, is he really good? Is he, maybe Brenda should cut this off. Maybe she should leave, you know. you kind of go through those emotions, and I think that's what was fun, to have that. And then the twist. I mean, there's like the twist, and it ties it all back together. People stay with it. Like I always compare it to like Mulholland Drive. Like when you go, like it's twisty enough, and you pay attention. The first few chapters, the whole story is there. Like you can figure it all out, but it takes you some time going through Brian and watching him just degrade and down to when part 1 ends, and that final confrontation in the hospital scene. It was like built it there, and it's just kind of that release of it all. It was like, he's at the bottom, like, that was. And that was, you're right. It was a little cathartic. You're right. You asked this question earlier. You get there. That's how I get out of it. It's when I'm done. It's like that release. Whew, I'm done. I'm out. This character is out of my head now because he is messed up. Like, So
I also think that's where the moral imperative plays in too, right? Because if you have a moral imperative to start with, then you know where the line is, right?
Right.
And you don't. You can dance toward that line. You could even step over it sometimes.
That's right.
But you're never going to fully cross over it, because that is the boundary in which that person is set inside themselves, right? So,
Yep. No. But
which really doesn't bode well for our society, that I've been watching movie after movie where everybody's bad. Everybody's just terrible, right? And sometimes satirically it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? And so, but I also think, there's something to be said for that and where we are as a society, but that's a whole.
No, it's a different box of wax. No, that's it.
The last question I want to ask you, Joe, before we take it out of here, do you feel like people make too much of being dark, or do you feel like that is there? You said flight or flight, right? So, is there a psychological or biological response that we're dealing with when we're doing light or dark, or people just make too much of that, and they're really not as separate as people think they are?
I mean, I think in story, like I said, we're playing with that, and we're intentionally playing with that. And there's been some studies, like funhouse studies, where people have put heart monitors and did research, and there is a line between the people having fun and enjoyment and understanding that this is fake, and then crossing that line into actual terror and fear. And I think that's a line that we play with. So I think we have characters and story. Once again, I think it's just a story, and you have it. I think people know that, and they go through it and they read it and they understand, because usually that morality, it's a lens of culture. And so if you're reading this, then you understand, you go, oh, that is the darkness there that I want to stay away from. So my real life, real situational, I shouldn't do that. Like, I should do something else, try something else, read a different book, get a different idea. But that's we're playing with this, I think, playing with that idea. And that taps into our own human nature, our own kind of biology of kind of, how we use stories, 10,000, 20,000 years ago. We're not that more advanced from a neurological perspective than those people then. And so we still respond to that, and we feel like we have a lot of control over it, but do we? So that's kind of, and that's what the writer does. That's what the screen, that's what we see on the screen, the book. You're really toying with that and presenting that darkness. And I think if it's a fully fleshed out, well-crafted story, then people don't. I think if you go stereotypes, then you open yourself up to have those discussions like, oh, that was too dark, or that was, you played into the stereotype to make some sort of cultural point that shouldn't have been made, and or wasn't, you didn't earn to make it, right? So you got to earn that story. And if you do it right, then people, oh, I totally get it. Then I think that's good. But that's where I see the line. But I think most people can distinguish between, the story, the characters, and enjoy the ride.
Can you enjoy something even though you're fearful of it, you think? Do you can you watch birds? Can you watch birds? Can you watch the birds?
I can. No, I do. I mean, I can, when it's one of those things where it's kind of using like VR now. People, if you immerse yourself into the film. I mean, it's a therapy technique, a real therapy technique, kind of giving yourself small doses that you can overcome that fear. You can overcome that terror that you have in there. So I can watch birds from afar. A lot of birds don't. I mean, it's just something about them. They have the high ground. We learned nothing from Star Wars. They have the high ground. So that is kind of that's always freaks me out. So, but yeah, that's something, But yeah, it's birds do. Yeah, I mean, they're like baby dinosaurs. They're like they're there. I mean, they're kind of mean. I don't know. They remember. I mean, like magpies, crows. I mean, they can remember you if you're nice or not nice. So I don't need a vengeful bird coming after me. That's for something I didn't realize I did. So
the irony of all of that is knowing you and where you are intellectually on the scale and where birds are intellectually on the scale. They've been proven to be some of the dumbest animals on the planet, right? So
I don't know. I mean, yeah, some of them are. See there, I went to birds. No, that's Joe Compton, not Joe Austin. So.
Come at me. Go ahead, crows.
Yeah.
Come on. Bring it on.
Yeah, crows are actually pretty intelligent. They are.
Yeah, no. There are species of birds that do. Again, you just can't. You cannot stereotype, right? I mean, there is.
That's right. There you go. That's it. But yeah.
So, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. Awesome conversation. I knew this would be awesome, and obviously, as we've proven at Dragon Con, you and I can talk for hours on end.
We can, yes. Yeah, thanks for having me. This was really good. It was really fun. I always enjoy talking about the topic, the process of writing. Villains, I don't get to talk about villains a lot, and fear and horror. So no, it's a lot of fun. So thanks.
Tell everybody where they can find all your wonderful stuff at, where they can get the podcast, where they can get your books and all that.
So you can find me at jothamaustin.com. So you can find my books there. You can find a podcast, Rabbit Hole of Research. You can find that on any place you find podcasts, Apple, YouTube, Spotify. So that's all over the place. The books, you can find them both at my novel, Ways to Love Me and Become Someone Else, and the Redline Chicago Horror Stories, which is a great anthology. A lot of great authors in that anthology. But yeah, they can find that any place you buy books.
Award winners in that anthology.
That's right. Yep, there are. Yep. So yeah, go grab a copy. A lot of great stories. But yeah, any Amazon, your indie bookstore, they can order them. So all the books are available wide. So, but yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, everybody, that's our show for this week. We'll be back next week doing this thing and talking more about darkness and villains. And thank you for all of you joining us. And remember, it's always time to go indeed now. Bye, everybody.